The first thing my husband said after I woke up was, "You have until sunset to prove you belong in this palace," which would have been alarming under normal circumstances. But normal circumstances usually did not involve waking beneath a gold-trimmed canopy while 6 strangers bowed beside the bed and called me Your Grace. I stared at the tall man standing near the window, dressed in black and silver, his dark hair neatly swept back and his blue eyes cold enough to preserve groceries. Somewhere behind the pounding in my head, a memory clicked into place. King Adrian Vale, the ruthless ruler from the crown's unwanted consort, the fantasy novel I had fallen asleep reading after 3 straight nights of overtime. And if he was Adrian, then I was Noah Ashford, his spoiled, scheming husband, the man every reader hated by Chapter 3. Wonderful. I had escaped unpaid emails only to become a fictional disaster with excellent cheekbones. Your Grace, whispered a young servant at my bedside. He looked about 20, pale and nervous, with sandy hair and the expression of someone expecting the ceiling to collapse. I'm Oliver. Do you remember me? Barely, I said, which was technically true because I had never met him in my life. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Convenient. He stepped closer and placed a small glass bottle on the bedside table. The Ashford crest was etched into its side. I recognized it immediately. In the novel, that bottle was presented as proof that Noah had plotted against the king. The accusation ruined him, and his desperate attempts to win Adrian back only made everything worse. According to the original story, I had less than 3 months before the entire palace turned against me. My stomach dropped. Then my body reminded me I had apparently skipped breakfast. It growled loudly enough for Oliver to hear. Adrian blinked. Do you understand the seriousness of this? Completely, I said, but I would understand it better with toast. Silence filled the room. Oliver looked ready to faint. Adrian looked personally offended by carbohydrates. You are accused of conspiring against the crown, he said. And you are asking for breakfast? I make poor decisions when I'm hungry. That was also true. In my previous life, I had once agreed to lead a weekend team-building retreat because someone offered me a bagel. Adrian studied me like I was a puzzle designed to insult him. He had expected tears, excuses, maybe some dramatic attempt to cling to his sleeve. The old Noah had spent years begging for his attention. I, however, had already wasted one lifetime trying to please impossible bosses. I was not starting another. I pulled the blanket higher and settled back against the pillows. Your Majesty, I don't know who placed that bottle here, and I'm too tired to invent a convincing lie. Give me breakfast, 1 nap, and access to the palace records. After that, I'll help you find the truth. His expression did not soften, but something shifted behind his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or concern that his despised husband had finally lost his mind. And if you fail, he asked. I closed my eyes. Then at least I'll fail well-rested. For the first time, King Adrian Vale had no answer. And that was the moment I realized the story had already begun to change. Breakfast arrived 12 minutes later, which told me 2 important things. The royal kitchens were efficient, and King Adrian was not entirely immune to reasonable demands. He remained beside the window while I ate toast, eggs, and enough fruit to convince my body that transmigration was not technically starvation. Oliver hovered near the bed, twisting his sleeves. Your Grace, perhaps you should apologize to His Majesty. Adrian looked at me. Oliver looked at Adrian. I looked at the last piece of toast. For what? I asked. Oliver nearly stopped breathing. Apparently, the old Noah apologized constantly, usually while offering expensive gifts or elaborate promises. None of it had worked. Adrian still despised him, the court still mocked him, and someone had still planted a suspicious bottle beside his bed. That seemed like strong evidence that pleasing the king was a terrible survival strategy. I will cooperate with the investigation, I said, setting down my plate. But I will not beg for affection I am clearly not receiving. Adrian's expression became unreadable. You expect me to believe you no longer care what I think. I care whether you execute me. Beyond that, your opinion seems like a personal hobby. Oliver made a tiny choking sound. Adrian stared at me for several long seconds, then turned toward the door. You will remain under observation. That is fine. You may not leave the palace grounds. Also fine. Your correspondence will be inspected. Wonderful. Someone else can answer it. He paused, perhaps waiting for fear or outrage. I reached for another strawberry. Adrian left without another word. By noon, I began dismantling the old Noah's life. I returned 6 jeweled necklaces, 3 ceremonial coats, and a gold carriage that looked too uncomfortable to justify its existence. I dismissed 4 attendants whose memories identified them as informants for House Ashford. They protested until I offered them generous severance and directions to the front gate. Then I asked Oliver to find me the quietest residence in the palace. He led me to a neglected eastern wing nearly half a mile from the royal apartments. Dust covered the furniture, vines crowded the windows, and the garden had surrendered to weeds years ago. It was perfect. Your Grace, Oliver whispered, horrified. No royal consort has lived here in decades. Excellent. No traditions to maintain. By evening, I had claimed a small bedroom, found a chair that supported my back, and discovered a white cat sleeping beneath an abandoned rosebush. The cat examined me with the same suspicion Adrian had, but accepted roasted chicken much faster. I named him Duke, mostly because he already behaved like he owned property. For the next 3 days, I avoided banquets, refused invitations from ambitious nobles, and studied the palace records between naps. Every decision confused the court more. Rumors spread that I was planning something enormous. In truth, I was planting herbs and trying to determine who had access to the royal medicine cabinet. Adrian's guards watched from every hallway. I pretended not to notice. On the 4th evening, Oliver rushed into the garden, pale and breathless. Your Grace, His Majesty received a secret report. I looked up from the dirt, beneath my fingernails. About what? Oliver swallowed. It says you met privately with the physician accused of helping arrange the poisoning. Across the garden, beyond the iron gate, King Adrian stood in the fading light, holding the report in one hand and watching me with winter in his eyes. Adrian did not enter the garden immediately. He stood beyond the iron gate as if the weeds themselves had joined a conspiracy against him, while the last light of evening turned the palace windows gold. Oliver leaned close enough to whisper, Your Grace, this would be an excellent time to look innocent. I am holding a garden trowel. You are holding it very suspiciously. I set it down before anyone accused me of planning agricultural treason. Adrian opened the gate and approached with 2 guards behind him. Duke, the white cat, watched from the stone wall and decided the king was not important enough to interrupt his grooming. I respected that level of confidence. Adrian stopped a few feet away and raised the report. You met with Dr. Henry Cole 3 nights ago. Yes. Oliver made another small sound of despair. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You admit it. You asked a question. I answered it. That is generally how conversations work. The guards looked carefully at the ground. Adrian unfolded the paper. Henry Cole was questioned after the poisoning attempt. He disappeared before the investigation concluded. He works in the Royal Infirmary, under another name. That seems inconvenient for his paperwork. Adrian stepped closer. His expression remained controlled, but his voice lowered. Why did you seek him out? I glanced toward Oliver. Because I have headaches, missing memories, and scars I do not remember receiving. The humor left the air. Adrian did not speak. I continued before courage became another task I postponed. Something happened to this body before I woke up. Dr. Cole agreed to examine me privately because I did not know who else to trust. You expect me to believe you remember nothing? I remember pieces. Faces. Rooms. Fear. Most of it feels like looking through fogged glass. Adrian studied me for so long that I became aware of every evening sound around us. Leaves shifting in the breeze, water dripping from the old fountain, Duke purring like a tiny engine. Where is Henry now? He asked. I do not know. Convenient again. You use that word whenever the truth annoys you. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might order my arrest. Instead, he walked past me and entered the neglected residence. I followed because it seemed unwise to let an angry king explore my bedroom alone. He searched the sitting room, opened a cabinet, and found nothing except dried herbs, 2 books, and a plate Oliver had forgotten to remove. In the bedroom, Adrian stopped beside the chair near the window. A stack of palace records supported one uneven leg. Those are classified documents, he said. They are also exactly the right thickness. He looked at me as though I had personally insulted the concept of government. Then his gaze moved to the open medical notes on the desk. Before he could read them, exhaustion pressed down on me all at once. I sat on the edge of the bed, intending to rest for 1 second. The next thing I knew, someone was touching my wrist. I opened my eyes and found Adrian leaning over me, his fingers resting against my pulse. Instinct moved faster than thought. I caught his hand and pulled it closer, not hard, just enough to make him lose his perfect balance. His face stopped inches from mine. Neither of us breathed. Then I released him and sat up too quickly. I was asleep. I noticed. His voice sounded different, quieter. Adrian straightened, but his attention had shifted to the collar of my shirt, which had fallen open slightly near my shoulder. Faint marks crossed the skin there, old and pale. His expression changed before he could hide it. "Who did that?" he asked. "That is what I asked Dr. Cole." Silence settled between us. Adrian stepped back, but the suspicion in his eyes had cracked around the edges. "You will remain here tonight," he said. "I already live here. Under guard." "That sounds less relaxing." He turned toward the door. Sleep pulled at me again, heavy and sudden. As Adrian crossed the threshold, a sentence rose from somewhere that did not feel like my own. "Memory. Do not drink the wine tomorrow," I murmured. Adrian stopped. I was already drifting under when he looked back at me. "What did you say?" But the room had gone dark, and somewhere behind my closed eyes, a stranger wearing my face was begging the king to listen. By noon the next day, I had learned two things. Royal banquets required far too many forks, and King Adrian had no intention of letting me forget what I had said in my sleep. "Do not drink the wine," he repeated quietly as we entered the great hall. "That was not advice," I whispered. "That was apparently unconscious prophecy, which is much worse." Hundreds of candles floated above long tables dressed in white silk and silver. Nobles turned to watch us, their smiles polished and their curiosity sharp. Adrian walked beside me in formal black, perfectly calm, while I tried not to look like a man attending his own accusation ceremony. Oliver had spent an hour arranging my collar. Duke had spent 10 seconds covering it with white fur. I considered Duke the more honest stylist. At the far end of the hall stood Duke Victor Hale, the king's chief advisor. He was silver-haired, elegant, and smiling with the warmth of a locked door. In the original novel, Victor appeared loyal until nearly the final chapter. That meant he was either harmless today or already dangerous, which was not a useful range of possibilities. "Your Grace," he said as we passed. "How wonderful to see you recovered. I am doing my best to remain inconveniently alive." His smile paused for half a second. "Interesting." The musicians began, servants moved between the tables, and a crystal glass was placed near Adrian's right hand. The moment I saw the dark red wine, pain flashed behind my eyes. A memory that was not mine opened like a door. The same candles, the same music, a hand wearing a silver ring passing a tiny packet beneath the table. Then a voice inside my head whispered, "Not that glass." Adrian reached for it. I moved before I could think. My hand struck the stem, sending the wine across the white tablecloth in a red sweep. The entire hall went silent. Adrian stared at the spreading stain. "Noah, please do not drink that." Victor rose slowly. An extraordinary reaction, almost as if his grace knew what the glass contained. Murmurs moved through the room. Every face turned toward me. My heart began beating too fast, but I kept my voice level. "Have someone test it." Victor folded his hands. "Or perhaps we should ask how you knew." "You can ask after the king is safe." Adrian looked at me, then at the captain of his guard. "Remove the glass. Seal the hall." The captain obeyed immediately. Victor's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone still. A servant near the musicians suddenly stumbled into a rope hidden behind the curtain. Above us, a heavy decorative frame tilted away from the wall. I heard with strain. Adrian looked up too late. I caught his sleeve and pulled him back as the frame crashed onto the empty space beside his chair, scattering flowers and silver ribbons across the floor. No one was hurt, but panic rushed through the hall. Guards moved to the doors. Nobles backed away from the tables. Adrian caught me by both shoulders. "Are you injured?" "Only socially." My knees weakened. The borrowed memory, the noise, and 4 days without proper rest finally caught up with me. The room tilted. Adrian's grip tightened before I could fall. "Noah, look at me." His voice had lost its royal distance. For one strange second, he sounded afraid. I tried to answer, but my vision blurred around the edges. Over Adrian's shoulder, through the confusion of silk and candlelight, I saw Victor standing perfectly still. Everyone else looked shocked. He was smiling. When I woke, The first thing I noticed was that someone had replaced my terrible Eastern Wing mattress with one soft enough to erase moral responsibility. The second thing I noticed was King Adrian sitting beside the bed, still wearing the same black formal coat from the banquet. His usually perfect hair had fallen across his forehead, and one of his hands rested around my wrist, as if he had been counting every heartbeat. I opened my mouth. If this is prison, the bedding has improved. His eyes lifted immediately. Relief crossed his face before royal control returned and locked it away. You have been unconscious for 3 days. That explains why I feel rested. You developed a fever. Less ideal. Oliver appeared from behind a curtain carrying tea, blankets, and enough concern for an entire hospital. He informed me that Adrian had remained in the room every night, leaving only for council meetings and returning before sunset. Adrian gave him a look that suggested this information had not been approved for public release. His Majesty was supervising, Oliver added quickly. Very closely. From that chair. Without sleeping. Thank you, Oliver, Adrian said. You may go. Oliver fled with the satisfied expression of a man who had successfully delivered dangerous gossip. I tried to sit up, but dizziness pushed me back against the pillows. Adrian reached forward and adjusted them behind me. His fingers brushed my shoulder for only a second, yet the careful movement felt strangely louder than the crackling fire. The wine contained a sleeping compound, he said. It was not deadly, but it would have left me defenseless during the confusion. Victor smiled. I know. That is rarely a promising detail. Adrian almost smiled, but his expression faded when he looked at me. During the fever, you spoke about places I have never heard of. Buildings made of glass. Machines that carried voices. A room filled with glowing screens. My chest tightened. Apparently, feverish me had no respect for secrecy. I also heard you asking someone named Margaret to stop scheduling meetings before 8 in the morning. Margaret was a powerful and merciless woman. A general? Human resources. Adrian considered that answer with grave suspicion. I looked toward the window. Rain traced silver lines down the glass, and the palace beyond it seemed too beautiful to be real. I had another life, I said quietly. Not here. He did not laugh. He did not accuse me of lying. He simply asked, were you alone there? The question landed harder than it should have. I remembered takeout dinners at my desk, dark apartment windows, and a phone that rarely rang unless someone needed work completed. Most of the time, Adrian's hand moved across the blanket and stopped near mine. He did not touch me, but the space between our fingers became impossibly small. You are not alone now, he said. For once, I could not find a joke fast enough to protect myself. His gaze lowered to my face. He leaned closer, slowly enough that I could have moved away. I did not. Then the door opened. Dr. Henry Cole entered carrying a leather case and wearing the expression of a man about to ruin a perfectly good moment. Adrian straightened at once. Henry checked my eyes, pulse, and breathing before removing a small crystal from his case. The crystal glowed when he held it above my chest, then split its light into 2 distinct colors. Henry stared at it. Adrian went completely still. What does that mean? I asked. Henry looked from the crystal to me. It means this body belongs to Noah Ashford, but the soul inside it does not belong to this world. The room became so quiet that even the rain seemed to reconsider its timing. Adrian looked at Dr. Henry, then at me, then back at the crystal glowing in 2 colors above my chest. Explain, he said. Henry lowered the crystal carefully. The body carries one spiritual imprint, but the consciousness carries another. His Grace is Noah Ashford physically, yet the person speaking to us came from somewhere beyond this realm. Adrian's face emptied of every emotion. Somehow, that frightened me more than anger would have. Leave us, he ordered. Henry hesitated. Your Majesty, there is more. Later, when the door closed, Adrian stood beside the bed without moving. The space between us felt wider than the entire palace. Who are you? He asked. I had imagined this conversation several times, usually while hiding beneath a blanket and hoping it would never happen. None of my prepared explanations sounded useful now. My name is Noah Bennett. I lived in a place with cars, computers, office buildings, and coffee that cost far too much. Events, not everything. Things have already changed. Did you know what I would say before I said it? Not usually. You are much more intimidating in person. He did not appreciate that attempt at humor. Was any of this real to you? His voice had gone quiet. The garden? The banquet? The things you said while you were ill. All of it was real. Or useful. That word landed with painful accuracy. Adrian turned toward the window. You warned me because you knew the future. You gained my trust because you understood the role I was expected to play. I did not plan that. How convenient. Hearing my own favorite complaint returned to me was deeply unpleasant. I pushed the blankets aside and stood, though my legs still felt unreliable. Victor will attempt to seize control of the capital in 7 days. Adrian looked back. You expect me to believe another prophecy? I expect you to verify it. Check the Western Armory records. Inspect the supply wagons entering through the North Gate. Ask Captain Marcus why 3 guard rotations were changed without his approval. Adrian's expression shifted, only slightly. Those details were not in the original novel. They came from the old Noah's scattered memories, fragments that had grown clearer since the banquet. There is also a sealed chamber beneath the council hall. I continued. Victor has been using it to communicate with someone inside the palace. Adrian moved closer. How do you know that? Because Noah Ashford knew. The man whose body I woke inside was not your enemy. He was terrified, confused, and trying to leave clues before someone silenced him. Pain flickered across Adrian's face, quickly hidden. I reached for his hand, then stopped before touching him. I never wanted your throne. I never wanted influence. I wanted a quiet room and enough time to understand why I was brought here. Then I started wanting you to survive. That part was not written for me. For one breath, Adrian looked as if he might believe me. Then the palace bells sounded from the central tower, 7 slow notes rolling through the rain. His eyes hardened again. He opened the door and called for the guards. Noah Bennett, until I determine whether your warning is truth or manipulation, you will remain under royal confinement. 2 guards entered. I did not resist. As they escorted me away, Adrian stood beside the bed, staring at the place where our hands had almost touched. At sunrise, Oliver entered my room carrying a folded black coat and the expression of a man who had personally received terrible news from the universe. Your Grace, he whispered, the king has signed an order for your public sentencing. I stared at the coat. Black is dramatic. Does the palace have anything in exhausted beige? Oliver did not laugh. That was when I knew the situation was serious. Guards escorted me through silent corridors toward the central courtyard, where nobles, ministers, and palace officers had gathered beneath a pale morning sky. Adrian stood on the raised platform in formal silver and black, his face calm, distant, and impossible to read. Victor waited beside him, looking almost pleased. I searched Adrian's eyes for some sign that the nights beside my bed had mattered. I found nothing. Noah Ashford, Adrian announced. You are accused of concealing your identity, interfering with royal security, and possessing knowledge connected to a conspiracy against the crown. A clerk unrolled a document. My name appeared beneath the royal seal. For one painful second, I forgot how to breathe. I had trusted Adrian. Not completely, perhaps, but enough to believe he would look for the truth before deciding what I was worth. Victor stepped forward. Your Majesty has shown admirable strength. Sentiment must never stand above the safety of the kingdom. I looked at him. You practiced that speech in a mirror, did you not? His smile tightened. Adrian raised one hand, and the guards beside me moved closer. Then the bells rang. Not the slow palace bells from the night before, but 3 sharp signals from the western tower. Captain Marcus entered the courtyard with a sealed ledger. Your Majesty, we found unauthorized weapons shipments listed as farming equipment, altered guard rotations, and payments connected to Duke Victor's household. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Victor's pleasant expression disappeared. Adrian descended from the platform and stopped in front of me. He removed the restraint from my wrists himself. The order was never meant for you, he said quietly. It was meant to convince him that I had rejected your warning. I stared at him. You could have told me. You needed to appear betrayed. I was betrayed. I gave an excellent performance because I had no idea it was a performance. Something almost apologetic entered his eyes. I know. Victor backed toward the council doors, but every exit was already guarded. You think this proves anything? He demanded. The court will never trust a stranger wearing another man's face. They do not need to, Adrian said. I do. The words struck harder than any declaration made before an audience should have. I looked up at him, still angry, still relieved, and far too aware of how close he stood. That was dangerously sincere. I have had a difficult week. I was imprisoned. I remained awake for most of it. That sounds like poor planning. Adrian's hand rose to my face, stopping just long enough to give me the choice to move away. I did not. His lips touched mine in a brief, careful kiss, warm against the cold morning air. The courtyard vanished for one suspended heartbeat. When he stepped back, I heard Oliver make a sound somewhere between a gasp and a prayer. "You still should have told me," I murmured. "I will apologize later. With breakfast." With breakfast. Victor laughed suddenly, drawing every eye back to him. "Enjoy your little victory," he said. "You still do not understand why Noah was brought into this world." The confidence in his voice chilled me. Adrian moved between us, but Victor kept his gaze fixed on me. "He was never summoned to save you. The chamber beneath this palace was built around an ancient gate between worlds. Noah Ashford discovered it months ago. He discovered my plans as well." My head throbbed, and a memory opened behind my eyes. A candlelit room. The old Noah kneeling before a circle of silver symbols, his hands trembling as he wrote a letter no one else would understand. Victor continued. He knew no one would believe him. Not the court. Certainly not the husband, who already despised him. So he searched beyond this world for a soul capable of changing the future. "Mine," I whispered. Dr. Henry pushed through the gathered officials, holding the two-colored crystal. Its light pulsed in time with the crest. "His grace was not displaced," he said. "He was invited." The truth arrived not as a voice, but as a feeling. The old Noah had been frightened, lonely, and running out of time. He had not chosen me because I was brave or powerful. He had chosen me because I understood what it meant to spend a life exhausted from pleasing people who never truly saw you. Victor smiled. The ritual required a compatible soul. Once that soul completed its purpose, the gate would reopen. Noah Bennett would return home, and this body would cease to hold him. Adrian turned to Henry. "Close it." Henry's face tightened. "The gate is tied to the royal marriage bond. It can be sealed only if the king gives up the crown's sacred authority." A stunned murmur moved across the courtyard. Without that power, Adrian could remain king in name, but the old noble houses could challenge his rule. The kingdom might fracture before winter. I looked at him and already knew what he would choose. That was the problem. "No," I said. Adrian faced me. "That is not your decision. It is when the alternative affects millions of people. I will not lose you to protect a throne. Then do not lose the kingdom either." The crest brightened, and a doorway of white light appeared beneath the arch of the council hall. Through it, I saw my old apartment. My desk lamp still burned. A paper coffee cup sat beside my keyboard. Only a few minutes seemed to have passed there. Adrian caught my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, and far more persuasive than any royal command. "Stay," he said. One word. No title. No distance. I wanted to. That was what made leaving unbearable. I pressed my forehead briefly against his and tried to memorize the quiet way he breathed. "You once asked whether I was alone in that world," I said. "I was. But I am not leaving because I want that life back." His grip tightened. "Then why?" "Because your people should not pay the price for loving me." Before he could answer, the gate pulled at my borrowed soul. I stepped backward, forcing my hand from his one finger at a time. Adrian called my name, and every part of me wanted to turn around. Instead, I crossed into the light. The last thing I saw was the king running toward me, not as a ruler protecting his power, but as a man who had finally found someone he could not command himself to lose. The light did not feel warm. It felt empty, like standing inside a room before the walls had been built. For one impossible moment, I saw both worlds at once. My apartment waited on one side, unchanged and painfully familiar. The palace waited on the other, distant behind a curtain of white. My desk lamp hummed. My coffee had gone cold. An unfinished email blinked on the screen, asking whether I could take on one more project. I laughed, because apparently the universe still had a sense of humor. Then I heard Adrian call my name. "Not your grace. Not Noah Ashford. Noah." The sound reached me through the gate, strained but steady. I turned. He stood on the palace side with one hand pressed against the glowing royal crest. Dr. Henry was shouting something I could not hear. Oliver was crying openly. Even Duke sat at the edge of the courtyard, tail wrapped around his paws, watching as if he had always known humans would eventually make everything complicated. "Adrian," I said, though I doubted he could hear me. He looked directly at me anyway. Then the crown on his head began to shine. The ancient symbols around the gate flared, and I understood what he was doing. "Do not," I whispered. Adrian removed the crown and placed it on the stone floor. The light inside it dimmed. The royal crest cracked down the center, not with destruction, but with release, like ice finally giving way to spring. Henry stared in disbelief. "Your Majesty, the sacred bond is breaking." Adrian did not look away from me. "Good." His voice reached me clearly this time. No one should be bound by a promise they did not choose. The gate trembled. The pull toward my apartment weakened. Adrian had not abandoned the kingdom. He had abandoned the old magic that claimed kings were more important than the people they loved. The crown's divine authority vanished, but the throne remained, supported now by law, loyalty, and every witness in the courtyard who had watched their king choose freedom over control. My apartment began to fade. I looked once at the desk, the cold coffee, and the life where no one waited for me to come home. Then I stepped back toward the palace. Adrian caught me as I crossed the threshold. His arms closed around me with a force that was not painful, only desperate, and for several seconds neither of us spoke. "You made an extremely dramatic decision," I murmured against his shoulder. "I learned from my husband. I am technically a visiting soul with questionable legal status. Then I will rewrite the law." "That sounds like work." His laugh was quiet and unsteady. "You are still impossible. And tired." "Of course you are." Weeks later, Victor's conspiracy was exposed before the court. Noah Ashford's name was cleared, and the kingdom accepted a new charter that limited the power of the crown. Adrian remained king, but no longer by sacred command. He ruled because the people chose stability, and because, despite his personality, he was actually very good at his job. The eastern garden bloomed by early summer. White roses climbed the walls, herbs filled the stone beds, and Duke developed a habit of sleeping on official documents. On the morning of our second wedding, Adrian met me beneath the old archway without a crown. "No titles today," he said. "No contracts. No magic. Only a choice." He held out his hand. "Will you stay with me?" I looked at the man who had once suspected every word I spoke and now stood before me with nothing hidden. "I should warn you," I said, placing my hand in his. "I am still too lazy to spend my life pleasing a king." Adrian smiled and lifted my fingers to his lips. "Good. This time, I intend to spend mine pleasing you." Then he kissed me beneath the white roses, and for the first time in either world, I was not trying to earn my place in someone's life. I had chosen it. He had chosen me, and that was more powerful than any crown.